If you can swing on him and kill him down there, do it. He just went way back up, right?
Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. This is going to be a great three-part series on elk calling with Steve Chappell of Chappell Guide Service and Chappell Hunting Productions. Steve is probably the best all-around elk caller that I know, and he does a phenomenal job in this three-part series going through the different sounds that he makes. We're going to cover mouth calling with diaphragms. We're going to cover external reed calling with his trophy wife and matriarch cow calls, external reed calls, and we're going to cover bugling. And he's going to demonstrate all of the calls, and we're going to talk about specifics and things that he's doing with his lips, with his mouth, with his tongue, and how he's making these calls and the thought process he uses. So this is going to be an unbelievable three-part series. I'm excited to share it with you. You hear at the beginning of this podcast some bugling frenzy, just chaotic cow calling and bugling and chaos. This is from one of Steve's hunts off of his Extreme Bulls 8 DVDs. And you can go on his website, chappellguideservice.com, and order the DVDs right off of his website. You can also order all of the calls that we'll be talking about directly off of his website, chappellguideservice.com. I want to thank him for spending a good couple of hours here with us, explaining exactly how he makes some of these sounds. I know you guys are going to love it, and it's just going to be awesome. I want to remind you guys, we've got GoHunt.com Insider as the title sponsor of this podcast. If you're not an Insider member, you can go to GoHunt.com Insider, click on the blue Join Now button. You can get a $50 KUIU gift card right away for signing up, or a $50 Sportsman's Warehouse gift card right away for signing up. So I want to encourage you to do that. Also, the Outdoorsman's in Phoenix, the Optics Authority is, if you use the J. Scott promo code, you get a 10% discount at everything there at the Outdoorsman's. Reel game calls, the elk reel. 50 or 60 people have contacted me telling me how much they've just absolutely loved the call. They're excited to use it this elk season. And you use the J. Scott promo code, you get a 20% discount on all calls over at theelkreel.com or realgamecalls.com. And then, of course, PhoneScope. If you use JScott16 at PhoneScope, you get a 10% discount of all products at PhoneScope. So, guys, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast, and I would highly encourage you to support the sponsors that support this podcast and make it possible. I know a lot of you do. I get emails every day from listeners saying, telling me about the different products that they've bought from these sponsors and how much they're enjoying them. And just thank you for all the positive comments. If you haven't, please go on iTunes and leave a honest rating and review. Those help my placement on iTunes. And we're just finished. August was the biggest download month I've had in the history of the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. And that is only possible from you guys, the great outpouring of support that I get from you guys. I want to hear about your hunting excursions this fall. If you're on Instagram, you can tag me, J. Scott Outdoors or J. Scott Outdoors Podcast. And I just appreciate you guys so much, and I look forward to sharing my hunts with you this fall and all the encounters that I have. So let's have a great fall 2016 season. Let's give it 110% effort, and just thanks for all the support. Let's get right to this three-part series with Steve Chappell of Chappell Guide Service.
Good.
Can you blow that call again? Just a few notes for me.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean about our wives. Wouldn't it be something if they could make a call like this and there would be no doubt And yes,
Yeah, but they'd use it all the time.
that would be wonderful. Okay, here we go. And Jay, by contrast in how I blow a normal cow call on a mouth reed or a normal three-dimensional sweet cow call on an open reed, when I use that call, it flies completely in the face of how I blow these other calls. I blow it often, loudly, and frequently. I've heard people say, yeah, this guy bugles every time his left foot hits the ground. Well, when I blow this call, I'm wailing away with it. Basically,
Just like that, like in the woods, would you blow it that many times or more?
Absolutely. But
Okay.
what I don't do is I don't move. Let's say, for instance, that a bull's bedded down in the afternoon and he has maybe just started bugling. The mistake would be to sneak in on that bull, get 100 yards away, and wail away on a sequence like that. That's not how you would want to do that. If you were going to sneak in on that bull, you would want to, and I think you are absolutely the best at this, sneak in, get close to him, and just baby talk him. Just blow nice, easy, little sweet cow calls. That's what he wants to hear when he's in that state of just getting up from being bedded down and just starting to bugle. So when I'm blowing this call, by contrast, I'm not going to sneak in and all of a sudden hammer him with that. I'm going to start from a distance a long ways away, and I'm going to walk in blowing it and warm him up to it, so to speak. So he's hearing it from a long ways away. And if he doesn't initially like it and not bugle back to it, then obviously that's not what he wants to hear. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to move in tight, and I'm going to sweet talk him rather than that. But if he's bugling to it, like say from a half a mile away, I'm just going to bring the show to him. I'm just going to walk right at him with the wind correct, and I'm just going to wail away on it. And it seems like the closer I get to him, if he's in the right frame of mind for it, he's going to get up and just start charging toward me. And it can be dramatic how quickly they cut the distance down. They can be 600 yards away, and next thing you know, you're dropping down, getting set up with him charging in on you.
Steve, what have you found, like, when you're doing that? Are they bugling and bugling and bugling, or do they, what's their reaction typically?
Yeah, most of the time they're like a gobbler just losing their mind, gobbling their brains out. Yeah, they're coming and they are bugling frequently. And then what it seems to do is it seems to just create excitement out there in the woods, and there'll be bulls that you didn't even know were there that start chiming in, and a lot of times you'll have a train wreck with 2 or 3 bulls that come into it.
And that call, that demanding mew, that estrus mew, that Chappell scream, whatever you want to call it, you feel that estrus excited orange reed with the thickness of the latex and the design of the plate and everything, that is the best call that you can make that sound with?
Yeah, it's the best one for me personally. I'm not saying that I can't make it on other calls, but I feel like it just is in the sweet spot. It's in the wheelhouse for making that sound exactly how I want to make it for me personally.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely an awesome sound. I remember the first time that you used it that I know of on film was, I believe you had a 7 east or west tag, and it was coming down to the end, and Gary Stanley said, start blowing that call, and you're like, you think? And he said, yeah, and you did, and that bull came in, right?
Man, Jay, that's awesome that you bring that up, because you're exactly right. That's the first time on video. I'd used it before, but not right there in front of the camera. And what happened is we had the hunt was slow overall to start with. It wasn't a good bugling hunt, and it was in 7 East. And we finally got a bull to bugle. I bugled and got a bull to bugle up the hill from us, probably close to 3/4 of a mile away. So we started hiking up toward him, and he just got super quiet. I mean, to the point where you're thinking, is he even still wanting to play the game, or what's he doing? So I started cow calling a little bit, and he just completely shut up. And I found a lot of times that herd bulls will do that to you as you're moving in. If you call on your way in, they'll completely shut up on you. And that's what he did. And Gary looks at me and he says, "What do you have to lose? Bust that call out and start blowing it." And I looked at him and I said, "Thanks for the vote of confidence. Let's do it." So I get that call out, and I just start walking toward the direction that we heard the first bugle and start blowing it. And I'll be doggone if not right away that bull starts bugling at it. And like I was saying a minute ago, I just walked straight at him with the wind right. And I'm telling you, the closer I got, the more excited his bugles became. And then it was just a hurried setup right there at the end. And he just came rushing in, glunking everything. I mean, he was totally sold on it. And I made a shot. There's a big story about that. Not the best shot I've ever made in my life, but thanks to a great, gracious sportsman named Charlie Rust, who I owe a great debt of gratitude to this day. I was able to get that bull back eventually. But yeah, that was the first time on video in a very dramatic fashion that a bull came into that. And then I'm convinced he was a herd bull, because when we came back the next day to track him, this shot happened in the evening, and I knew it wasn't a perfect shot, so we, played it safe and left him overnight. There were cows right there on the scene of where this happened, and it was like they were confused and didn't know, where he was or what was going on. So I'm totally convinced that he was with those cows, left those cows to come into that sound.
Awesome, awesome, and it's something that I think takes some practice. I think you guys can go on and check out Steve's videos. He's got some great videos of him doing that. You can listen to this over and over, and if you can sound like that and blow it at the right time, I think it's going to bring in a lot of bulls for you, and you're going to have a lot of success. Okay, Steve, I want to make sure we covered everything on the cow calling. I know you're going to talk about your closer and your challenge reads here for bugling. Um, you and I both are cow callers. If we had to categorize ourselves, we're cow callers, we're lovers, we're not fighters.
Right.
We've had way more success sweet talking bulls as opposed to getting in their face and blowing the door down. But let's talk about bugling. You blow a really nice bugle. You've got a really nice locational or kind of a contact bugle. And then you've also got lip balls. You do all sorts of things. I'm curious your thoughts of bugling, and maybe talk about how you use the bugle, just to get bulls to answer. Maybe demonstrate some bugles here for us.
Yeah, you bet. And I agree wholeheartedly. Our mindset is we're kind of lovers versus fighters, and right or wrong, that's just how we approach it. There's some great buglers who have success with that. I use it more in limited circumstances. I will use it to locate. I'll also use cow calling to locate as well. But as you mentioned, we always want to name calls so that everybody's familiar with what they've heard. This would be, a contact or a location bugle. And it's just kind of a nice, easy bugle. Again, like if you were to equate it to cow calling, it would just be what I would call just a standard cow call. This is just a standard contact bugle, nothing too aggressive. You're just trying to get a bull to sound off and answer back to you. It's going to sound something like this.
What call is it, Steve? Which
I've
read?
got the closer, the red taped
Okay.
reed. Yeah, that double.
Okay.
Just something like that. Again, I'm not putting hard tongue pressure. I'm not being forceful or aggressive with it. I'm just being nice and saying, here I am over here again. I'll demonstrate it again. And you notice I didn't even do the growl at the beginning. Honestly, I don't hear a lot of bulls doing that growl at the beginning. It's more of they just break right into a tone. Would you agree with that, Jay?
Yeah, and I think it's probably the single biggest mistake people make when they're bugling is we've always been taught this growl and then hit the high pitch and then back to the growl,
Yeah.
where the best success I have bugling is when I start right into a high pitch. I mean, I know you and I have talked about it before when you've heard me bugle. Um, that's just the way I do it, and I just think high growl is not the way I hear bulls do it. I either hear them,
Yeah.
usually you just hear high pitch down to the growl personally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll equate it to going back to the cow call and saying it's the human double clutch, so to speak, in bugling. When you do the growl, high growl at the end, it's the double clutch cow call that we all recognize. So, like you said, Jay, they just go into a high note when they're high note bugling, and then there's just that cutoff at the end, which basically I just abruptly take my tongue off the reed and stop the airflow. And if you can hear it in the bugle, I'll demonstrate it again. It's like this. And it's just by dropping your tongue off the reed and activating your vocal cords a little bit into the sound as well. And the only reason I realize that there's a little bit of a vocal cord aspect of it at the end is because there was a time when I lost my voice one time and I was trying to bugle, and it just sounded really windy and there was no depth to it at the end. So I realized at that point that you do, whether you realize it or not, you put a little bit of vocal cord into it at the end, although not, in my opinion, a growl per se.
For sure. So that's kind of what you do to just get a bull to bugle back, just to see what's around, just to try and get an answer, kind of feel for what's shaking out there.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the next level that people talk about, and again, not trying to name calls, but to make it familiar for people, would be what a lot of people call a challenge bugle. And it's more of an aggressive, emotional bugle. Again, it's going to be just that high pitch sound, but it's going to have a lot more emotion in it. It's going to be higher pitched, and you're just going to hear the difference in emotion. And I'll demonstrate that right now. Okay, you can see there's more volume. It's a higher pitch. You can tell, just like I was talking about earlier with cow calling, you can hear that different emotion in there, and that's what you're looking for.
When would you use that call, Steve?
I would use that, and I did actually use this on a bull last year in Unit 9. He was a bull that had cows. I actually saw him with the cows, and then he went just out of sight, and I did my typical trying to call him in with cow calls, Jay, and he would bugle, but I could tell he was going away. And then I switched to a mouth diaphragm, and I did a little higher pitch cow call on it, and I got him to bugle. And the minute he bugled back, I felt like I had nothing to lose. I jumped on him with that bugle, and he turned away from his cows and came from about 200 yards away, left his cows and came into that.
Lost his mind, like, you little pipsqueak, I'm going to come over there and whip your butt.
Exactly. How dare you? He might have had the mindset that, one of his cows happened to get left out and was not in the harem anymore, and when he heard me cow call and he heard me cutting him off with that bugle, it just ticked him off. He couldn't take it.
I think something needs to be said there, that just like humans, elk have their own personalities, and there's some elk that at the drop of, just like people, at the drop of a hat they want to fight.
Absolutely.
And then there's people that, you can kind of push on them a little bit,
Yep.
and they're still going to try and not fight. And then, finally you can get them to fight. And then there's people that it doesn't matter what you do to them, they're not going to fight you.
I believe that 100%. And I've seen that year after year in the elk woods. And I always say, in Arizona specifically, sometimes you'll have bulls running a harem that are 320, 330, 310 in their score. And I believe that's because of their temperament. They're a super aggressive fighter type of bull, just like with a human, a fighter mentality. And then you can have a bull that's a satellite bull, that's a 350, 360 bull. He's got a beautiful, pretty rack that, of course, the cows would, look at and admire, but he just doesn't have that mean, angry temperament in him.
Yeah, I mean, and just like, bulls that sound big and tough, and all of a sudden you get up there and it's, a 310
Yeah,
bull that's, and then there's a 350 standing off to the side, with a pretty bugle, and
yeah,
and
pretty.
he's docile and feeding.
Yeah,
Where, you can get, you know, little guys that are just tougher than nails and they want to fight just because they like it, and then you got some big 6'4" guy that's, got muscles and everything else, and he's just a gentle giant.
yeah, and it does go back to that in the elk woods, absolutely. With how they bugle, how they respond to cow calls, whether they're running a harem or not. And the beautiful thing for us as hunters is, we can those satellite bulls are ripe for the picking, and many times it blows you away what will come in.
Yeah, for sure. And then so now you've got chuckling and
Yes.
grunting and some of that stuff. At what point do you become a chuckler and do that?
For me, that's typically never. But
But you're very good at it though.
here's the thing. I think if somebody practices, and to me, it's the hardest call in all of elk calling. I think it's even harder than that estrus scream sound. I really do. I think it's the call that's going to take the most practice, the most attention to, and unfortunately, I think it's going to yield the fewest results. So I don't know that a guy does himself well by spending a lot of time practicing on it when he should be practicing cow calling. But anyway, it comes down to a two-part call. And I just came upon this maybe within the last year or two that really the first part of it is very similar to a bark. Um, and of course, you don't want to stop with just a bark because that's an alarm sound. Um, but you're blowing very forcefully out on the latex with your tongue against the reed, and it's going to make this sound initially. This is the first part of the call, Jay. Okay, that's just basically a bark. But then the second part of the call, I'm breathing a deep breath of air back in with my tongue actually not on the reed at all. And it's making the second part of the call, and I'll do it slow at first and then I'll speed it up a little bit. Okay? And then
So in other words, the second part of that call, you're breathing back in. You're not blowing out. You're sucking back in.
exactly. Again, it sounds like this. That's exactly it. And the hard part when you're breathing back in, you almost have to kind of grip the call in your mouth and kind of close your mouth down because you can suck that diaphragm right down your throat if you're not careful about it. And
Which is not recommended.
exactly. It might take you out of the elk woods to the hospital. So the real difference to me, because you hear people talk about chuckling and grunting, really the difference to me is the frequency of it and the speed of it. And to me, chuckling hits a higher note and it's faster and they do it more times. So this to me is what a chuckle sounds like. Okay, and then a grunt would be more like this. And what I'll do with the grunt, Jay, is I'll do a lip ball because it just gets me more in the groove of being able to do a grunt. Because when I hear bulls doing grunting, they more frequently follow up a lip ball with grunting as opposed to chuckling. So it's going to sound like this in a full bugle. Let me do that again. More like that. I hear, bulls when they do come off of a lip ball, they're more apt to do, that deep grunt and do it just 2 or 3 times, as opposed to the chuckling, which has the faster cadence to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I could hear the grunt being slower, and the chuckle is more of a almost like an ape, like you say.
Absolutely, yeah, like an ape going after it.
So you would do what you would call a challenge bugle and a chuckle together, and then you would do a lip ball and a grunt together. So show me or demonstrate kind of your challenge bugle into a chuckle.
Okay, here we go. Okay, that would be, yeah, the challenge bugle going into chuckling, and then this would be the lip ball going into grunting. That would be the difference right there.
Good stuff right there. That's really good quality sounds. You're a lover, not a fighter, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And overall, I'm 99% a lover. Like I said in the very beginning, your podcast with Joel Turner really intrigued me, and I'm going to be interested to try that out a little more now that I know what I'm supposed to be saying. Um, that bull calling cow sound, to me, is basically that lip ball sound, and again, it's like this. Starts out in a high note, and then it goes into that vibrating. Basically, you're vibrating your lips to get that sound, and then you're cutting it off abruptly. And it's a fairly quick call like this, with no chuckling, no grunting at the end. Just like that. And some people, I believe, call it a display bugle. It's like you're showing off to the cows. You're blowing a pretty, awesome sounding bugle that's got that, lip ball characteristic in it. And yeah, I do notice that when I've blown that near a herd bull with cows, it definitely gets a reaction out of them.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear how your experience is trying that new little trick this year in Arizona and in Colorado, both places where you elk hunt. And it'd be interesting to see after the season if you think that it works like you think it will.
Yeah, we'll hold Joel's feet to the fire on it, right, Jay?
That's right. He's a fun one to hold to the fire. He's a great caller in his own right,
That's
and just a phenomenal guy. Uh, Man, we've covered a lot of ground today. Just trying to think if we've forgotten anything.
the only other thing that I can think of as far as bull vocalizations would be like, raking in a tree, glunking, that type of stuff where you're really not doing it with a call or your vocal cords or your air, so to speak. Um,
Let's talk about that. Glunking for one is a sound. Um, you okay? Glunking for me is a sound primarily that I think a bull uses when he does not want to let other bulls know that he's around and he wants to herd and tend his
hey,
cows passively. And he's actually glunking, talking to his cows with his glunk and not trying to give off his location as to attract satellite bulls. That's my
I,
interpretation.
I would agree that that is the most accurate way of thinking about it. Yes, because if he's very vocal and he's bugling, he's going to attract. It's like flies to stink. If he's if he's bugling a lot, that's a tip off. In fact, when I'm in the elk woods, if I hear a bull bugling aggressively and frequently, I go, "That's a bull with cows right there." And I
Yeah.
can guarantee you, other elk know that even more so. So you're exactly right. He's being more subtle about it. He's tending his cows, talking quietly to him by doing that glunking.
But I will also say that I have called in bulls that are by themselves
Yes.
and they are coming to the call
Yep.
and they are glunking. But what I feel like they're saying is, I'm coming, I'm coming. I just don't necessarily want to bugle and get my butt kicked, but I'm coming. You hear me, but I don't want anyone else to come over here and spoil our little love session.
Rendezvous. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had that happen frequently. Sometimes bulls even come in completely without bugling and just glunking. So I think, yeah, it serves that purpose of not advertising that you're coming to the other bulls. And then also it seems to kind of be a confidence call that they make. Um,
Yeah,
just dominant, real confident type call.
Yeah, but I've also seen 5 points doing
Yeah,
it. But what I think is, yeah, they're feeling confident because they hear you cow calling and they think you're the only one around. So they're going to show the most dominant, confident display they can without giving away their location. I've heard people say that only mature herd bulls glunk, and I just totally disagree.
yeah. I
I,
wouldn't
I
say only mature herd bulls. I would say spikes don't do it, but you are right. A kind of an aggressive 5 point or a 3-year old 6 point can absolutely glunk. Yes.
do you have the ability to glunk? I mean, I've Um, the old Primos tube,
Yeah.
I used to be able to
Right.
glunk that Terminator. Do you ever glunk?
Jay, I don't, to be completely honest with you. I have used it. I will say that I have used it very, very infrequently, and it's only when I feel like I have nothing to lose. I've thrown the whole tackle box at the bull. I've cow called to him. I've estrus called to him. I've bugled, and I can't get him to break away. That might be my last thing that I go to. So I don't do it frequently. And you're right that old Primo's Terminator hose was very good for doing it. I used to bugle, and I should have mentioned this earlier. I use this Bully Bull Grunt tube by Bugle and Bull Game Calls or Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. Um, I think it's phenomenal. I think just like the design of an open reed cow call, the type of grunt tube that you use makes a huge difference in the quality of the sound you get when bugling. So I'm very partial to the Bully Bull Grunt tube. But I can, by like stiffening my hand, the palm of my hand, make as if I don't know what you would say, but I'm pointing all of my fingers straight out in a fairly rigid position, and then I'm tapping the end of the call in the palm of my hand and getting a sound like this. Something like that. And that again, it doesn't to me reflect how three-dimensional actually glunking from a bull sounds. Um, but again, it's not a highly important call on my list of or in my tackle box, so I'm not bringing a special grunt tube with me to do it.
For sure. And you've got all those other sounds.
Yes.
It just tells me that you don't feel that as a caller that's that important of a sound to have.
Yeah, I've seen that if you do it to the wrong bull, which is usually most bulls out there, it for whatever reason conveys to them that you are a very confident bull, and it tends to me to make them shut up and go away more so than come in. At least
The
my
times that
experience.
the times that I've used it is when I've been very, very close to them. It's a bull with cows, a very aggressive
Yeah.
bull, and you're really tight and you make that sound. That sound only means one thing, and that is when you see a bull tending with a cow
Yep.
and kind of nosing around with her, he's glunking, and so you sneak into a herd and there's no other bull around other than the herd bull, and you make that's saying that, hey, that's only a sound, and what it is I'm glunking and I'm not bugling at you. I'm trying to steal a cow, and I've
Yep.
seen that glunk. I've glunked at bulls and seen it work really, really well. But I've also glunked at them and seen them go away because it's a very like. How do you know if think of it from the bull's perspective? Say he's not an aggressive
Right.
bull and he's got his cows, and all of a sudden there's a glunker in the herd with them, and he's like, "Oh crap, I got to go over there and fight." He may not.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, if he's a fighter, he may run your head
Yeah.
over. He may just come charging over.
That's a perfect point. I think there's three elements to glunking that you've got to keep in mind. You've got to keep in mind the temperament of the bull to start with, and I would believe that you want to use it on more aggressive bulls, in my experience, and yours as well. I think your distance from the bull, and then your timing of when you do it. All three of those things are key in glunking or not glunking. So you want to have an aggressive bull. You want to be super close to him, almost infiltrating his herd, and then your timing needs to be right. Number one, because you're making that motion with your hand on the grunt tube, and you can be picked up on, and see, your movement can be seen. So all of those are critical in calling a bull in with a glunk.
For sure, for sure. Well, Steve, we've covered a lot of ground. It's been awesome. Any other thing going on with you? Anything going on as far as people can order the calls right off your website, chapelguideservice.com. Any new videos, any website, anything going on with what you got
Yeah,
going?
thanks for asking, Jay. I did release Extreme Bulls 8. It's a new DVD. It was released this spring. And it, showcases the hunts from like the last 2 or 3 years. It's got a lot of hunts from Arizona, archery hunting, rifle hunting. It's got a couple hunts from Colorado as well. All of it is during the rut, which is the cool thing. There's a ton of bugling on it, call in after call in on there. I always say that the best teacher for me, at least when I was new in the sport of elk hunting and elk calling, was watching actual hunting videos versus demonstration videos, because I feel like demonstration videos can be more canned versus when you watch a hunting video, you're seeing what people actually do when they're in the field in the heat of battle, so to speak. So as a new elk hunter, I paid attention to, okay, what call were they blowing? Were they cow calling? Were they bugling? Okay, the bull just bugled. How many calls did the guy blow back to him, and did it work? So I think if you watch these hunting videos as a student rather than just as an observer, you can learn more from them than you can actually learn from a demonstration video. Is my feeling on that. So I have that video out, and then I also have all the calls on there. They can be purchased individually or in package deals, so anyone can save money if they want to buy multiple calls at the same time. I even have a package with videos and video included with it. So yeah, and again, most people, if they're out of state, aren't going to pay tax. They're not going to pay shipping with orders of $10 or more. So I would encourage anyone that's looking to get into elk calling or just wants to get their elk calls for the fall to go on my website and be confident in getting great elk calls that are proven.
So no tax and free shipping. Any orders over $10, chapelguideservice.com. You can pick up Extreme Bulls 8 and any of the elk calls that we've talked about. I can say that the elk calls are phenomenal. You're just an unreal caller, as you've demonstrated, and it's been great watching you progress. And it seems like the thing that I really like about you is you could have a long time ago settled back and been a really good caller, but it seems like every year you continue to push yourself and make better sounds, and that's something that's awesome, because you've been a phenomenal caller for a long time, but you get better and better and better. And it's pretty cool to watch all the different sounds and the wide range of quality that you can produce. And I know the guys that hunt with you get to see that on a 14-day basis, whether it's an archery hunt or a 7-day rifle hunt or whatever. So it's just awesome. And thanks for coming on and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And I encourage anyone to go definitely check out chapelguideservice.com and check out Steve's YouTube channel. And even though he's saying that the hunting videos are best to watch, I 100% agree. You also have some phenomenal demonstration and instructional videos as well. So
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, and I think that helps people learn how to blow the call initially. So that's very important. I shouldn't discount that. You're right.
yeah, but I mean, I also agree with, it's one thing to make great sounds, and we've been doing a real elk sounds series here on the podcast, just so people could listen to real sounds of elk. But I think you do bring up a great point about, watching a video like Extreme Bulls 8, where you can actually see the timing and sequencing, not only of the call structure, but of when to call and when not to call, and the different sounds you make compared to what the bull is doing. And there's nothing like that firsthand experience. And you can make great sounds and not call in many bulls, or you can make great sounds and know the timing, which is a whole nother podcast episode,
Yeah.
of when to call and when not to call and what to do. But I think first things first, start making great elk sounds. Listen to the elk themselves, listen to guys like yourself, I can easily tell all the listeners that if they spend a lot of time listening on your website, they're going to be a better elk hunter. They're going to be a better elk caller. So, buddy, it's been awesome. I'll be praying for you. Be excited to hear how your dad does on his hunt and your different hunters across the state. And just been awesome spending the time here with you. And so I don't know when I'll see you because I'm going to be in Utah, and then
Send me a picture,
uh,
Jay.
yeah, we'll have to send pictures. That's a beautiful thing about uh, texting and cell phones
Yeah.
is we can send each other photos. So uh, until next time, buddy. God bless. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jay. Thanks for having me on again. It's a real privilege to be on here. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I'll be praying for you as well. It's nice to have a brother in Christ that shares the same passion, and it's been a great friendship for 20 plus years. And yeah, I just really, really appreciate you having me on here. I've really enjoyed this today. Thank you so much.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Guys, I want to thank you for listening to the three-part series with my friend Steve Chappell of ChappellGuideService.com. And I want to remind you that you can go on his website and you can order all of his DVDs, his elk hunting DVDs, the Extreme Bulls series, number 1 through 8. You can order them right on his website, as well as all the calls that Steve has demonstrated in this three-part series can be purchased right there on his website, ChappellGuideService.com. I want to thank him for spending time with us and really going over the calls. I know you guys will find value in it. I know I did. And he's just a great person, a great elk guide, and a great friend. And guys, I want to thank you for your support of this podcast. We just came off our best month ever, the most downloads the podcast has ever had. And I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for all of the positive comments that you leave on iTunes. I want to thank you for all the great encouraging emails and all the questions and such that I get on my email, jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. I want to encourage you that if you'd like to send me a question, feel free to. If you've got anything that you want to hear on the podcast, give me a shout. I love to hear from you guys. Also love to see you guys tagging hashtag JScottOutdoors or JScottOutdoors podcast on Instagram. It's always fun to follow you guys and see how well you're doing in this hunting season. So please come find me on Instagram. My new website, jscottoutdoors.com, has links to all of the podcasts, both on Podbean for Android users and iTunes for you guys that have Apple products. You can also link to all my social media, Instagram, my Facebook page, the YouTube channel. And it's just been a great three-part series. Elk season is right here in front of us. A bunch of you guys have already shot bulls, and I just look forward to getting out there and chasing elk myself and using some of these tips that I learned from Steve. And guys, thanks for all your support, and let's just keep plugging away in this 2016 season. Guys, I almost forgot. Right after this, I'm going to play a bunch of Steve Chappell blowing his calls, so you can use that to mimic and try and get better with your elk calls. And then following a bunch of series of Steve calling, I'm going to let some of the real elk sounds from some of the prior episodes on the J. Scott Outdoors podcast, so you can hear the real elk, and you guys can just download these episodes and try and elevate your elk calling. So I hope you enjoy it.